This regular meeting of the Aurora Board of Education is called to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Acom? Here. Mr. Zayas? Here. Mrs. Connor?
Here.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Here.
Mr. Cebulski?
All right, we'll start this evening with the special recognition of Chief Brian Byard.
Good evening, board members and the audience. Thank you. As most of you know, every year the Aurora Police Department hosts a golf outing at the Barrington Country Club. As part of that, we raise a lot of money, give money, funds to the Rotary Club, to the school, of course. This will be my third year giving it to the schools. And as part of it, we have a lot of whole sponsors, a lot of raffle prizes, and as I said, we raise a lot of funds. It's a sell-out every year. It's a great event, so when you guys see it advertised, if you want to become part of it, feel free, or if you want to volunteer to take on some of the workload, feel free there too. It takes about 2 to 3 months, I mean, really of a lot of work to get through it and if you've ever run a golf outing, you know how much work it is. But we're happy to say that we don't have to sell it, it sells itself, and we derive a lot of funds from it. So tonight we just want to give the school a check for $8,500 as part of the donation. I think this will make $28,500 we've given you in the last 3 years. So if you guys would generously accept this check, we'd be happy to present it to you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And we thank you for the donation, which will go toward the needs of our students, but we also, in a more general sense, thank you for making our schools better and safer. Thank you. I think.
I'll take a picture, Brian.
Okay, there's no public speaking tonight, so we'll move on to the approval of minutes of the regular meeting of November 27th. May I have a motion for approval? Are there any comments or additions, edits to those minutes? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Abstain.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes,
Mr. Acom?
Yes.
minutes are approved as written. And next, we will move to the superintendent and assistant superintendent report.
Thank you. I'll just take a couple minutes. I wanted to talk a little bit about looking forward to 2024 and toward the next steps for our potential new construction project and bond issue. I wanted to be sure to keep the board up to speed on our most recent steps and what's expected around the corner. The ACSD Construction Committee, which is Bill, Paul, Sal, and myself, along with members of the TDA architectural firm that we hired, met the first full week of December to discuss the next steps of the construction planning process now that the levy has passed. The folks at TDA still have work behind the scenes to do, but the plan is to meet with the AHS instructional leaders, the department chairs, on January 9th of 2024 to go over some of the basic plans of the new high school as well as to garner feedback. Then the plan is to process that information and then meet. The next meeting would be January 18th, 2024 with the entire AHS staff. From there, we have some tentative dates in February to meet with the newly formed construction steering committee, of which Mike Acom volunteered to serve on as a board representative, but that'll also include administrators, parents, staff, and other community members. This group will serve as sort of like a sounding board and liaison to the different groups that they're involved with to the construction committee, so that we ideally hope to have a parent community group that and members that are that serve on the construction committee that are immersed in the process, and they'll be strong advocates come fall when we do have that November issue on the ballot. And then lastly, toward the end of February, we'll also start meeting with Harmon, Layton, Craddock, and Miller staff in order to gather their input on potential renovations that will be needed, and, their wish list, if you will, to best transition to a different building, as each of those will transition once the new high school is constructed, if all goes well. So this would really be part of phase 2 of the project, but we do need to collect the input now in order to plan accordingly from there. So that's just for the first couple months. We'll have other updates as we kind of progress through this piece, but I wanted to at least let you know that we are starting that process.
Thank you.
Okay. And then at this point, then I'm going to get out of the way and hand things over to Paul and the crew that are coming in to talk about, as you can see.
I'll just slide over here to the microphone to make sure we're ready. And I'm not going to say much. I know you've read my report, received my report. Tonight's focus is going to be on these 3 ladies, our elementary principals, who don't always get to talk to the board and address everyone. But we did have a really successful K-3 parent curriculum night in early November with a focus on math and reading. Very positive feedback. Evening went really well. I was super proud of these principals, of Jen and Kara, our coaches, and all the teachers that were involved. And it was just great talking to the parents on the way out, hearing their reactions, and seeing what they had learned for that evening. So I'm going to say very little. I'm going to let them sort of split this into thirds. And so are you, all 3 of you coming up, or just one at a time? All 3? All right, come on up. Are you going to explain the goodies that they have in front of them, or does that come later? Okay. All right. I've
Yes,
seen the
yes.
floor.
Don't mess with perfection.
Mrs. Rising, here we go.
All right, so thank you Thank you to the members of the board and for Dr. Milsatich for inviting us to speak this evening to you. We had just, I think, a great feel-good evening. It was wonderful to bring back our K-3 early elementary parent curriculum night. So Mrs. Goodman, Mrs. Mentz, and myself are going to work as quickly as we can. There was so much that happened that night, but we'll try to be brief, but give you a really nice overview of the evening and how we planned it. So you may or may not know this, but it has been several years, so, oh, thank you. Perfect. It has been many years since we actually invited our families in for a curriculum night, probably pre-pandemic. And we really had 4 big whys that we wanted to bring this back to our schools. So as Mr. Roberto says, we want to connect the community to the schools and the schools to the community. And this was a great way for us to do that. So we got a chance to connect with our K-3 families. We also wanted to take an opportunity to really review our K-3 ELA and math frameworks. As you know, over time, Dr. Milsatich just talked about PD that our teachers have gone through. So there's been some changes, some, ways that we have continued to enhance our framework with all of the new laws that have came about with the science of reading. So Ms. Menta is going to talk a little bit about here the integration of phonics and phonemic awareness into our frameworks. We also wanted to allow families the opportunity to be immersed in the curriculum. So when we planned this evening, we actually planned it for some breakout sessions for our parents. So they got a chance to actually see what it feels like, what it sounds like to be in one of our ELA and math classrooms. I think that was just a lot of fun, and kudos to our teachers who did a great job with that. And then lastly, we really wanted to engage our families and really strengthen partnerships. So that is something that is paramount, I think something we feel very passionate about. So as you can see there, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and as you have in front of you some goodies there. Our night was created with the theme of a movie event or a movie night, so who doesn't like a good movie night, and popcorn and goodies. So we made the night kind of come alive in that manner. You can see there the goodie table, and then we also had a raffle. So we had some raffle prizes that were ELA and math manipulative tools that we allowed our parents, once they saw the breakout sessions, they would then be, wow, I see what that is. So they got a chance at the end of the evening to earn some of those prizes. So all of our participants had an opportunity to put their name into the raffle, and at the end of the evening we had a little fun as well. So our agenda for the evening, we started with welcomes and introductions. So all of us, Kim and Maria and myself, as well as our amazing coaches and Mr. Lehman, as well, welcomed all of our families We gave them a 30,000-foot view of our curriculum, and then our coaches talked a little bit more in-depthly about our frameworks, both ELA and math. And Ms. Menta is going to talk a little bit about that today for you guys as well as we kind of work through our presentation today. And then we went into our ELA and our math breakout sessions. We also had a little fun to start the evening with our families just to kind of gather some information about what they knew as far as our frameworks and to help kind of engage them a little bit in what they were going to see in the breakout session. So we did a live poll. As you can see there, there's a little QR code that we read the questions out loud, like the human brain is naturally wired to read and write, and we won't make anybody here do that. But they got a chance to kind of think about that and then check their thinking. So it was kind of a fun way to see what our parents knew as well. And I think they really liked that kind of hook to our presentation. And then the big thing with, creating this evening was family connection. So the power of parents is always paramount. I think we're very passionate about that in our schools in general, but especially with our youngest learners. So we really felt that this allowed us to continue to keep the lines of communication open with our families, creating teamwork, collaboration, and partnerships. And once again, you can see there from the picture, we had a packed house. So it was just fantastic to hear the hustle and bustle in the hallways and just hear the parents engaging with our ELA and math curriculum. So with that intro, I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Menta, who's going to talk a little bit about the ELA and the math frameworks.
Good evening. I too would like to express my gratitude not only to Dr. Milsatich, but also to the Board of Education for giving us this opportunity. Elementary doesn't always get as much airtime, which we understand, we know how that works, but we really appreciate the evening tonight and feel kind of special getting to come up and share something that was really a neat part of our year so far. So after we gave our parents some welcome and introductions, kind of warmed up their brains a little bit with our polls, we then went into giving them some more in-depth information about the frameworks that govern the work that their kids do each and every day. Mrs. Miller, I guess before I get started with kind of what we did, what Kara and Jen did, I do want to make sure to say we are so incredibly grateful for those two lovely ladies. I've worked in a couple different districts, and we have never, ever had the type of instructional coaches for the district like Aurora has. And they are two of our most valuable assets, and they are fantastic collaborators with us as building leaders, but also with our staff. And they roll their sleeves up and get right in there with the kiddos as well. So it was wonderful to have their voices on the evening as well and have their faces there for our parents to see that partnership that we have with them, and then be able to hear them talk a little bit about what their passions are and what they love. So we opened up with Mrs. Miller, our literacy coach, and we really wanted to drive the point home to parents with ELA how complex the processes of reading and writing are. It's not easy to sit down and coming in, even knowing your letters and letter sounds, to be able to just open up a page of a book and start reading words. It is a really, really complex process that we're not naturally wired to do. So we really tried to drive that point home to our parents. And help them give their kids a little bit of grace at times. Our parents are driven, our kids are driven, but we also want them to understand that they all develop at different times, and that's okay, because it is a really in-depth, involved process, an important one, but one that takes a long time. We then broke down the skill of reading a little bit more in depth into two major areas. We talked about word recognition with our parents and what the pieces of that are, and how important it is for us at our primary levels to increase the automaticity of those three specific areas with our kids. I would say that's a huge focus for Maria and I, especially at Miller and Craddock. I think some of it spills over into Layton, definitely with our third graders, and even our fourth and fifth graders a little bit. Hopefully not too much, but that those are critical building blocks, and they have to be there. And if we can't increase the automaticity of those three areas, then the strategic nature of language comprehension is very difficult to build with our kids. So they have to be able to read the text, and they also have to be able to understand it. And so we, again, really wanted to drive that home to our parents and have them see kind of laid out all the different pieces and parts of those two processes in order to help our kids be skilled readers. So they took a lot of that in. It was neat to see. Because learning reading is so different from when they went to school, even when I went to school, even when I graduated college, learning how to read and teaching kids how to read has drastically evolved. So it was neat to be able to drive that home. We then went into just our daily components of our ELA framework, what our kids get their hands on every single day, what they're doing, what they're involved in. We have an enormous amount of minutes dedicated to ELA for a reason. We feel that that's a building block for everything, so we wanted our parents to have a good understanding of how that spills into so many different areas for all of our kiddos, K3 especially, but I would say K5 and even beyond for sure. So after Mrs. Miller finished driving home those important points about ELA in our framework, we then got into Mrs. Morelos, our math coach, and she opened up talking a little bit with our parents about the 5 major areas that students have to be proficient in across mathematics. You can read, the gist of those, but, understanding the why, understanding the how, being able to understand how mathematics is useful and all the different ways it's useful, and all those different strands weave together in order to create that well-balanced mathematician that has all the right skills to be a wonderful problem solver no matter what's thrown in front of them. So that was a great visual for our families. We then wanted to make sure that our parents understood that we are driven really across all of our math blocks, across all of our buildings by 3 main parts during math. We work on some fluency activities with our students. We help to build their computation, and we want them to have parts of their math block where they are applying all the things that we're teaching them. And this is a big shift for our families too, because this, for the majority of them, is not how they learned math. This isn't how I learned math, where we were very algorithm-based, and if you figured out the formulas and memorized the formulas, you were pretty good. If you could get your time up on the time test and finish all those problems under a minute, you were doing pretty well. But that's so not quite the focus that we have in our framework here in Aurora, which is pretty amazing to see. So that was a neat to see some pictures of sort of how that happens, and also make sure helped our parents understand the difference between that algorithm learning, which is a part of the puzzle for sure, but all those other pieces as well that go into play. We then would be definitely leaving a big part out if we did not draw their attention to the standards for mathematical practice. These 8 different standards are a big piece of our core and our learning standards, but not only do we want our kids to get the content for math and understand the specific skills that they need to be able to do, but these different standards for mathematical practice are critical to weave into all the learning that they do with math. So again, not something that you would necessarily see in our gather reports that go home each trimester, but definitely something that's woven into the work that our kids are doing every single day, whether they're working with Unifix cubes or they're building numbers or learning expanded form, whatever it might be. And then finally, we do have, we didn't put the ELA one in, but we definitely need to do that, but we wanted to draw our family's attention that we are continuing to build phenomenal resources online for ELA and math. Oftentimes we hear from our families, what can I do at home? How can I help my child? What's a good thing for us to do when we're done with dinner time that's easy and that they love and they're engaged with? So we have our coaches have set up these amazing websites that our parents can get to, and we have those accessible, had those accessible that night as well, and introduced those to some of our families. So all in all, a very successful night, and we felt like we came away with providing our families with that great understanding of what ELA and math look like in Aurora, which is a pretty cool thing. So then we moved into, I think, our favorite part and their favorite part of the night, the breakouts.
Absolutely. I want to say thank you as well for allowing us this opportunity to share all the great things that we are doing in our buildings. One of the highlights of our night was the breakout sessions. After the families were all gathered together in the main gym area, we did break out into different classrooms where they could be honed in on the grade level that their children are sitting in. If they had children that spanned multiple grade levels, we kind of had a gauge of that ahead of time, so they had an opportunity to maybe visit one grade level for ELA, and then when we had a switch time, they could go to the other grade level if necessary. This was our chance to have over 16 of our top educators come out and actually help the families see what it feels like, what it looks like to be a learner here in our classrooms. They were actually teaching the lessons just like we do each and every day. It was pretty fascinating to see some of the parents kind of discover some of their own misconceptions about math and maybe have a little bit of productive struggle, just like some of our children do in our classrooms every day. And that, I think, helped them to make some connections to what their children are going through every day. They made sure that they had an opportunity to know where all the sessions were located so that they could swap through different hallways and make sure that they could attend the sessions that were most important to their family, and or maybe if they needed to have a better understanding of ELA or math at specific grade levels, that they knew exactly where to go. Finally, we have linked all of the presentations for both ELA and math into this slideshow so that you guys would be able to have a chance to see everything. But across kindergarten through third grade, all the families had such amazing feedback about what the parents were experiencing, and the teachers actually taught the adults as if they were the kids. So they might notice and say, hey, I see that you have a capital letter. Try again. Can I see a lowercase? And so the parents had an opportunity to see what it felt like to have some specific feedback, which we do in our classrooms every day. We also had an exit survey where families could give us some feedback, ask some questions, and let us know how the night went. Overall, it was very well received by all of our families. Some of the specific feedback would be hosting this event maybe a little earlier in the year, making sure that it was communicated a little bit more widely so that families could have a chance to have it on their calendar, come out for this special night. And finally, we want to make sure that we have really good opportunities for families that might need multiple nights to experience something like this. A one-time night was pretty challenging for all families to have access to this. But overall, families then walked out with some treats just like you are tonight. So we had popcorn and candy for you as well, and we just want to say thank you for helping us do great things in our classrooms every day. And if you have any questions, we are always available if you need anything, and reach out to us. Come check out our ELA and math classrooms because we would love to have you a part of our day as well.
Thank you all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for providing such a fun and engaging way of partnering with parents. We know that that's a big part of our success.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That'll be it for our reports then. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ballas.
Thank you, Mrs. Mahalis. This evening, I have 4 different resolutions for your consideration, and I'll start with the financial report for the month of November. And in November, our expenditures exceeded revenues by a little over $3.4 million, which decreases our general fund cash balance to $14.98 million, so a little bit under $15 million, 5 months into the fiscal year. In November, revenues are about 3.6% less than projected, and expenditures pretty much what we did project. Revenue side, normal variances, and it's not a big revenue month, so obviously there's not a whole lot of activity going on there. The big thing to speak about on the expenditure side is we paid our annual principal amount of $419,000 for our latent certificates of participation, and that's the next to last payment. So next November, the meeting will be celebrating the last payment for the latent COPS. So thus far for the fiscal year, our revenues are about $18,000 less than projected, expenditures about $400 less. So we have an unfavorable variance of about $17,000 5 months into the fiscal year. And these are updated based on our November forecast. So pretty much, you know, right on schedule as to where we expect to be right now.
Okay, thank you. Exhibit D1 is a resolution to approve financial statements and reports. May I have a motion? Second. Are there any comments or questions?
Bill, just explain quickly, what's the difference between the 002 account and the 002 fund and the
002 is a bond repayment fund. So we do have the one bond issue currently outstanding from 08-09 when we did an addition to the high school. So that's taxed separately. That's a separate tax item, and it goes directly into the bond repayment. So the money can't be used for anything else. 003 is the permanent improvement fund, and that is where the monies from the permanent improvement levy go into. and those can be used for any kind of capital expenditure with a lifespan of at least 5 years. So it just depends where the tax dollars go to. One's for the bond repayment, and the other be for permanent improvements.
All right, Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
All right, resolution is approved. Next.
Next is D2, and this is a resolution to proceed with the renewal of the PI levy for the March election. So this is the 1.5 mil PI levy, which actually came into existence back in 1989. So this is, I believe, the 7th time that it's coming for, for a vote again. So again, it's a renewal, no additional tax dollars to anybody. And this, again, is used for any kind of, roof repairs. We buy school buses out of here, capital type items with a 5-year lifespan or greater.
Okay. All right, Exhibit D2, a resolution determining to proceed with the submission to the electors of the question of renewing an existing general PI levy. May I have a motion for approval, please? Chair seconds. Are there any comments or questions?
This is, yes, yeah, these dollars go directly into the 003 fund.
That's how that is.
Correct. Yeah, that's its revenue. Right, that, and then we're in a little bit of interest on it, so, but the main part is the levy.
Okay, Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
Next.
Next, we have D3, which is a resolution to approve a then and now statement. And this is for Weston Hurd. And what this is, these are some legal fees on a due process hearing earlier in the year. The majority of the legal fees were covered through our insurance policies through Liberty Mutual. But this is some additional costs over and above which insurance did not cover.
Exhibit D3, a resolution to approve then and now statement. May I have a motion, please? Second. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
And last.
And the last but not least is D4, and this is a resolution to approve an advance, and this is from the general fund to the bond fund, the 002 fund. So our debt payments, which we have the COPS, which is separate, that's what comes out of PI and some out of general fund. But the bond fund from the 0809 thing is through the debt service of the 002 fund. Our debt payments are weighted heavily in December. All the principal's in December, and in June we pay interest. So we pay a lot more in December and a lot less in June. Our taxes come in kind of 50-50, 51-49. So you're paying more out than it's coming in. So we have to advance from the general fund this $90,000. When we receive our spring settlement, then we will return that advance to the general fund. And then the debt service fund would have the additional dollars in it to bring it back, into a positive situation.
Okay. All right, thank you. Exhibit D4, a resolution to approve appropriation amendments as explained. May I have a motion for approval?
Move.
Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Cebulski?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes,
Mr. Akam?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
Yes.
resolution is approved.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much. All right, next on to new business, we have a resolution to accept gifts and contributions. May I have a motion for approval? And I will read through what it is. It's Rube Adler Sporting Goods donated $432.25 to the hockey program. Do More Flowers, Cookies and More donated $40 to the wrestling program, and Bright Funds donated $1,300 to the high school. there any comments or questions other than thank you? All right, Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Hakem? Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas? Mr. Sobolski?
All right, under personnel resolutions, we have 10, and I'll take them together if that's okay. I'll read through them. Exhibit E1B1 is a resolution to accept resignations. Exhibit E1B2 is a resolution to employ licensed substitute teachers for this current school year. Exhibit E1B3 is a resolution to employ support staff substitutes for this current school year. Exhibit E1B4 is a resolution to award supplemental pupil activity contracts to non-district personnel. Exhibit E1B5 is a resolution to employ specialists for this school year. It's one reading specialist. Exhibit E1B6 is a resolution to employ long-term substitute teacher for this school year. Exhibit E1B7 is a resolution to award supplemental contracts to district personnel. Exhibit E1B8 is a resolution to approve new supplemental position. That is the position that's been discussed with us for the athletic department. Exhibit E1B9 is a resolution to approve the introductory appointment of support staff in Mr. Vollison's office. And Exhibit E1B10 is a resolution to employ certified homebound tutor for this current school year. May I have a motion for approval, please? Chair, are there any comments or questions about any of those? All right, Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mr. Zayas? Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Hakem? Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Sobolski?
Resolutions are approved. Exhibit E1C is a resolution to approve the high school program of studies as presented to us earlier and discussed last month. May I have a motion, please? Chair seconds. Are there any comments or questions? All right, Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes.
Mr. Hakem? Mr. Sobolski? Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas?
All right, the program of studies is approved. Under board items, we have a resolution to set the date for our organizational meeting for next year, and it is set for January 8th. May I have a motion, please, for approval? And we've all said yes to that. Can I call the roll, please?
Mr. Zayas? Mr. Sobolski? Mr. Hakem? Mrs. Connor? Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes. All right, and then,
And with that, I will call for nominations for President Pro Tem for the beginning of the organizational meeting.
I nominate Pam Hollis.
And, okay, is there any other nominations? Okay, there being none, Mr. Sobolski? Mr. Hakem? Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Zayas? Mrs. Mahalis?
yes. All right, and then also under board items, I would just like to thank Tony and Miriam for your service, for your support and all that we did, for your friendship. And I know that you'll remain vigilant and involved, and we welcome that, so thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other board items? All right, meeting is adjourned. Well, I guess I need a motion. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Mr. Volleson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Hakem? Mr. Zayas? Mr. Sobolski? Mrs. Mahalis?
Yes. Meeting is adjourned.